What's the best government in these islands? It is the Scottish government. Ministers who know the difference between being in government and being in power, and between Sturgeon, Salmond and Swinney in particular, their finance secretary, you can see what a government can do when it really applies its imagination. It's a different system to ours, and therefore it might be a little easier, and they have a majority. But what does John Swinney say about energy? And he is the best minister in these islands. He says that renewables is Scotland's biggest economic opportunity, unquote. And when I heard that in June 2010 at a conference in London, it struck me, because renewables is Ireland's biggest economic opportunity. And the reason it is because the quality of our wind, our wave and our tide is the best in the world. And when you think about it, that makes sense because we face into the Atlantic. And that's the ambition that we should have, to make renewables our biggest economic opportunity. What does that mean? It means that because of what we can do with solar, tidal and wind in particular, we can not only become self-sufficient in electricity, we can become net exporters into the international grid, which is what the British and Irish government have been speaking about in recent times. It's a little known fact, but the world birthplace of modern tidal power is 30 miles from here, in the Narrows, in Strangford Lough. That's the world birthplace of modern tidal power, because there is no tidal plant of that scale anywhere in the world feeding into the national grid, supplying electricity to 8,000 homes in that area. When the tsunami hit Japan a number of years ago, the Japanese politicians and energy giants came to Strangford Lough to see what tidal power looked like. So whilst people might think this is all just woolly, that is the scale of what we have to do. And what does that mean in terms of small businesses? It means that when the surge came with renewable applications, and you had some figures earlier, especially on individual wind turbines, the planning system began to turn that around, and that the numbers of approvals for individual wind turbines that sustain rural farms and rural businesses in particular began equally to surge in order to draw down the benefits of that, including with grant aid. So you can take the concept and make it real in the lives of people in the north, if you have the ambition and the wherewithal to all do that. Yes, we need the interconnector. We need that for both energy costs and energy security. We don't need fracking, and certainly you don't need it until you can prove that it can be done safely and responsibly. And those are the two tests. Can it be done safely, in respect of which there's a lot of international opinion that disputes whether it can or cannot, and can it be done responsibly? Because the experience of the fracking industry in Pennsylvania and America is that there's a lot of irresponsible activity. So much so that when I met the Environmental Protection Agency in DC on 2 occasions over the last couple of years, they became more, in my view, more and more dubious about fracking, because the big companies were not showing what had happened underground, never mind overground, in terms of responsible best practice. And we need to get our heads around this, because as we saw this week, the scale of climate change, if we didn't know it already, is irreversible and growing, and that the emissions that are above us now, even if we had no emissions over the next 20 or 30 years, would continue to do damage to our climate. So in my view, biggest economic opportunity. The issue is, are we, like the Scottish government, going to recognise it and put into place the architecture to exploit it?